Welcome to another video from McFatter Tech Musser. If you like these videos, please click subscribe. 70-740 Lesson 18, Maintaining Server Installations. Well, this is going to be a lot more than just maintaining our installation. What does that even mean? What does maintaining server installations mean? What we're talking about is utilizing Windows Server Update services for patch management in our network environment, being able to implement an anti-malware solution utilizing Windows Defender, integrating Windows Defender with our WSUS, that's Windows Server Update Services, and Windows Update, as well as performing backup and restore operations using Windows Server Backup. And within that, we're going to be looking at backing up DHCP and DNS, how we can back up certificate services, all these different sections. So we've got a lot to cover. So let's begin by getting into managing our updates. It's critically important that we be able to manage the computers and the operating systems that they have installed, and being able to understand the security of each one of those systems. If we rely on individual users to install updates, we have no idea whether all of our systems are updated, some of them are updated, whether there's updates that have failed to install, whether there's updates that have not been installed. You have no idea. You can't manage your assets if you don't understand the state of your assets. This is what Windows Server Update Services allows you to do. Instead of each individual system connecting to Microsoft Update on the internet and downloading updates perhaps when a user gets around to it, we download all the possible updates that are required to a server running Microsoft Server Update Services. From here on out, I'm just going to call it WSUS. Then, using either registry settings or group policies, we specify that our systems in our domain, in our network, are going to connect to our WSUS server for their updates. This allows us to get reporting and be able to have insight into whether a system is fully updated, whether it's missing some updates, whether updates have failed. When would be the last time that it connected? When was the last time that it checked for updates? When was the last time it reported its update status? Many benefits to running WSUS. This is critical in maintaining the security profile of your organization. So understand that intruders and some virus, worms, rootkits, spyware, and adware gain access to a system by exploiting security holes in Windows, Internet Explorer, Microsoft Office, and other software applications. The first step that you have to take to protect your network against malware is to keep your systems up to date with the latest service packs, security patches, and other critical fixes. Microsoft typically releases these updates on the second Tuesday of each month. For many years now, it's been known as Patch Tuesday. Now, if you're at home, you may get them on Tuesday. If you're in a domain, those updates may not become available till Wednesday. It just depends on when your system is polling for those updates from Microsoft. Now, in between there, if there is a critical need for an update, Microsoft may release what's called an out-of-band patch. And this could be released at any time throughout the month. Usually it's when something is extremely time sensitive or very critical. Now, because our computers are often used as what we call production systems, you should always test any updates to make sure they're not going to cause problems. Are they going to lock the system up? Therefore, I encourage everyone to create a mini duplicate network in their Hyper-V or other virtualization environment so that they can test these updates as they become available and then be able to confidently implement those updates to their production systems. Very often, this may be referred to as a time to patch parameter. If you have a service level agreement to provide updates and services to an organization, your servers may fall under a time to patch requirement. Whereas within a certain time of an update being released for a server, you are obligated to have that server updated. Would we take a online high volume e-commerce web server and immediately install updates as soon as they become available? Absolutely not. They need to be tested, need to be verified that they're not going to cause a conflict, that we're not going to cause an issue with something previous. That's called regression testing. And that they are going to work in your environment. This is why you use that test environment. But you need to get them updated. You can't just forget about it. Now, your desktop systems, perhaps not quite as high a level of testing. But still, you want to be able to have a level of confidence when you release those updates that they will work. Use your test environment. When we release these updates from Microsoft, they're typically classified as important, recommended, or optional. Our important updates, they offer significant benefits such as improved security, privacy, and reliability. You need to test these and install them as soon as they become available. And you're going to release these through your WSUS system. Recommended updates, they're typically to address non-critical problems or perhaps provide some type of enhancement. They don't address any fundamental issues with your computer or Windows software, but they can offer meaningful improvements. You probably won't release those immediately. Typically, there's no critical need for them. Optional updates, and these can include updates, drivers, or perhaps new software from Microsoft to enhance the computing experience. Now, these would typically be installed manually. However, there is an option to have optional updates become available through WSUS. Depending on the type of update, our Windows update can deliver security updates, critical updates, and service packs. We need to understand what each three of these categories are. A security update is a broadly released fix for a product-specific security-related vulnerability, such as an update to Internet Explorer, to Windows Server, to Windows 10. They're rated based on their severity, and this is indicated in the Microsoft Security Bulletin typically as critical, important, moderate, or low. That critical update, here again, it's a broadly released fix, but for a specific problem addressing a critical non-security related bug. Our service packs are a tested cumulative set of hot fixes, security updates, critical updates, and updates, as well as additional fixes for problems found internally since the release of the product. Service packs may also contain a limited number of customer requested design changes or features. Make sure that you also understand that after an operating system is released, many corporations consider the first service pack as the time when the operating system has matured enough to be used throughout the organization. What does that mean? Well, for example, the company that I do consulting work for, they just received notification of a major release of a new version of the software that runs their email server. Well, in the same way as when Windows 10 or Windows 8 or Windows 7 or whatever Windows operating system was released, it's not been let's call it fully vetted in a work environment, in a production environment. Organizations do not want to implement new products that have not been thoroughly tested. However, by the time a service pack comes out, you have a pretty good understanding on the implications of releasing that operating system into your environment and what will be required to support it. That is why most organizations will wait until a service pack has been released and then they feel they have a level of confidence in that operating system. Now going back to that major software release for the email server, we'll be releasing until the first patch for that because it's probably going to address a number of problems that they find just the same way as a service pack addressed many problems in an operating system. Now, configuring update settings. We use Windows Update. Now, you can use Update and Security, Windows Update in your Windows 10 machine or Windows Server 2016 machine to connect to Microsoft's Windows Update and retrieve those updates. However, in your domain, it's best to use WSUS, or you can also use System Center Configuration Manager. System Center Configuration Manager is a whole nother product that we could spend weeks on. We're not going to be delving into Config Manager in the context of this course. When we first install Windows Server or Windows 10, we open up Update and Security and we go to Windows Update and we can click check for updates. You can see that. We've all done that. We can also select advanced options, and that gives us the ability to customize how those updates get to our machines. Now, for those advanced options, this is where WSUS or Config Manager comes in to keep your systems updated. Most of those settings you're going to manage through group policies. The user won't even have the opportunity to change them. Now, if we're using a system like WSUS, the advantage is you get the opportunity to test the patch, schedule the updates, and prioritize those updates. You get to test it, and once you determine it's safe, you deploy it. You know that those machines are going to get it. You can customize how they're updated. You can choose how they're installed. Now, understand there's also an option to defer upgrades in Windows Update. Understand that that doesn't affect any of those security updates. It does prevent you from getting the latest Windows features when they become available. Now, if Windows Update fails to retrieve updates, you may want to check proxy settings in Internet Explorer. See if something changed that. Make sure you can access the internet. Make sure your network connection is operational. You can also view the installed updates by selecting Update History. Now, how do we manage updates with group policies? This is by far the most attractive way for an organization to manage the update process for their systems. With a group policy, you can automatically configure the Windows Update settings for those systems so that you have better control when that system gets its updates, perhaps when it has to install them, when a reboot's performed after the updates are installed. We use this to be able to control the process. We use group policies, and here is how you go about those steps, and understand that there's more settings like automatic update detection frequency. In other words, how often are your clients, your systems, going to check with your WSUS system for a new update. Allow automatic updates immediate installation. So if you get an update that does not require the system to be restarted, this would allow that update to automatically be installed without any intervention. Turn on recommended updates via automatic updates, no auto restart, reprompt for restart, many different settings. Make sure you understand these, but you know what? I want to show you what those group policies look like. And here on our domain controller in group policy management, we can see a policy that I created. And I named it London Computers. I've also got a policy for London servers. We'll take a look at the difference between those. If we look at London Computers, we can see it's a domain policy. We can see the permissions and such. But here's the important stuff. Allow automatic updates immediate installation, enabled. Allow non-administrators to receive update notifications, enabled. Automatic updates detection frequency, enabled every hour. Here is a critically important one. Configure automatic updates, enabled. And there's multiple options, and we'll take a look at this option and also the option that's used on our servers. Option number 4 is automatically download and schedule the installation. This way, a user does not even have to download the updates. When you do this, you can schedule when those updates get installed. For example, schedule install day every day at 3 a.m. So will your will your updates get installed if the system's turned off? No, you need to have some mechanism to make sure those systems are on and available at that time. So this might not be a reasonable time. Perhaps you want to set it more for 7 a.m. or 8 a.m. depending on what time your organization starts. Maybe fire this off an hour before employees arrive. And then additionally, enabled is every week, so every day of every week. Alternately, you could disable that and say every day of the first week of the month, or the second, or the third, and so on. Now also the last option, install updates for other Microsoft products. This is how you allow updates for products like Microsoft Office. Configure auto restart required notification so that the user has to dismiss that notification telling them that a restart is required. Auto restart warning notification schedule. Client-side targeting. You can do server-side targeting and client-side targeting. We're going to talk about the difference between those two later on in this lecture. Use Windows Update Power Management to automatically wake the system. So you could have a system that goes to sleep and the Windows Update Power Management will wake it. And then just as important is specifying our intranet Microsoft Update service location. This is the location of your WSUS server. You need to provide this, otherwise your systems won't know where to check for those updates. And then also turn on recommended updates. These are all typical settings that we would use. In the example in our lesson, we don't use anywhere near those settings. This is closer to what you will see in a production environment. Now remember the auto download and schedule install? That might not be a good idea for servers. Maybe we want to be able to test those updates before they even get downloaded to our computers. That would be a good idea. So if we look over here on the server policy for updates and we scroll down to that same section here, notify for download and auto install. You're not even going to authorize the updates on the WSUS server until you've tested them, and then at that point you still have to tell the server to download the updates. A multi-step process for making sure that those servers are only getting the updates that you want them to get. Now, okay, back to our textbook. So how do we do that? We install the Windows Server Update Services role. It's a role like many other things in Windows Server, and you do it from Add Roles and Features. The main component is WSUS. It gets installed on the server. This is the service that enables you to manage and distribute updates to your clients. This can also be the source for other WSUS servers in your organization. You can have upstream and downstream WSUS servers depending on the size and the way your organization is created. If you have branch offices and you want to be able to still control the way those clients in the branches get updated, you could install a downstream WSUS server. It in turn would connect to the upstream, your main WSUS server, so that those clients still have to go through your WSUS system. And there's two different ways that you can configure that downstream, and we'll talk about that later on too. Of course, Microsoft Update, this is our connection on the internet to where we get those updates. If we're using WSUS in our organization, our server connects to Microsoft Update, not the clients. The clients connect to WSUS. WSUS in turn connects to Microsoft Update. And then the Update Services console, and what that is that's how we manage WSUS. And if we look here, here is a view of that console. The server, from the server perspective, from the updates perspective, and from the computer perspective. We'll take a little bit deeper look into this later on. When we're going to install WSUS, it's all about planning. Everything we do in our organization, we have to plan. We need to determine our deployment strategy. How are we going to go about deploying those updates to our desktop computers, to our servers? We're going to install the WSUS server role. We're going to specify the update source for that WSUS server. Is it going to connect to Microsoft Update, or is it going to be a downstream server that's going to connect to our upstream WSUS server? We're going to synchronize updates to it. We cannot deploy updates until we've synchronized and made updates available on it. We're going to determine how our client computers connect to that WSUS. That's our setting up client computers. And then finally, until we begin approving those updates, they can't get installed on the client computers. So you have to go through the process of approving those updates. There's two basic deployment strategies that we can use. When we want to be able to determine that appropriate deployment strategy, you want to ensure that you have the correct servers installed in the appropriate locations based on how your organization is dispersed. Recognize when and where to place your WSUS servers so that you can reduce unneeded traffic across your WAN links. In the example on your screen, this organization is using a single WSUS server. It connects to the Microsoft Update servers. It in turn deploys all updates within your organization. The upstream server in this case is Microsoft Update. Now, if you have multiple WSUS servers, you're going to have upstream servers and downstream servers. In this case, your main office WSUS becomes the upstream server, and your branch office WSUS becomes the downstream server. Here again, the main upstream WSUS connects to Microsoft Update for all updates. They're downloaded to the main office upstream WSUS server. It deploys some updates, but also allows a connection from the branch office WSUS downstream server. It can make all those updates available to that WSUS server for a local administrator to determine how they're implemented and approved for their clients, or this can be set up so that it sees the same approval and updates as the main office WSUS, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. And here are those steps for installing an upstream WSUS server. The difference between doing an upstream and a downstream is mainly when you get to the point of where you're going to connect. For example, here, choose upstream server and you choose to synchronize with Microsoft Update. If you're configuring a downstream server, you would configure it to connect to your upstream server. Very important. Understand that if you use HTTP for your WSUS to make its connections, it's going to use port 8530. If you're securing your WSUS with certificates and using HTTPS, you're going to use port 8531. Be sure that those are not blocked on your perimeter firewall. Now, understand that when the downstream WSUS server synchronizes with the upstream server, it downloads updates in the form of metadata and files. Now, that update metadata is found in the WSUS database. Those update files are stored on either the WSUS server or on the Microsoft Update servers, depending on the configuration. The location is determined when you set up WSUS. If that server is a downstream server, the products and the classifications included with the synchronization are set up on the upstream server. Think about it. Your downstream server is not going to have anything available to it that the upstream server is not configured to make available. Now, understand this next set of bullet points. Now that you've installed an upstream and downstream Windows Server Update Services server, the components that are installed with WSUS are .NET Framework 4.5. It requires that. You're going to have your RSAT, your remote server administration tools that get installed. That gives you your snap-ins and your command line tools. It utilizes IIS for your web server because it uses that web server application to deliver those services it provides. If you're working in our test environment, you're going to use the WID, the Windows Internal Database. If we're going to do this in a production system, we probably will not use the WID because in production, typically these are larger organizations and you're going to use the connector for SQL. And you're going to connect to a SQL Server database on a SQL Server server. Much better performance levels. And then finally, there's the Windows Process Activation Service. That's a software component that does what we call generalizes that IIS process model, and it removes dependency on HTTP. We took a quick look at the Update Services console. We'll look at that more again. In fact, let's do that right now because here's the options screen. And if we take a look over here under options, we can define whether or not this is going to synchronize from Microsoft Update or another Windows Update server, an upstream Windows Server Update Services server. And you would define that WSUS server here. And you can see that if it's using HTTP, it's going to use 8530. If we're using proxy servers in our organization, this is where you'd define it. Products and clarifications allow us to define what products we're downloading updates for. For example, you may have an Exchange server, so you would need to check that to make sure that you're downloading the proper updates for it. Perhaps you're using Microsoft Office. Define which Office suites are in your organization and only download those for that particular installed application. SQL Server, System Center, Azure, Small Business Server, Windows 10, all the different types of Windows 10 installations that there can be. Now, for example, we're downloading for Windows 10 and Windows 10 version 1909 and later upgrade and servicing drivers, as well as Windows Server 2016. If we had a 2019 server in our environment, we'd want to select that and download those as well. Now, also classifications. What type of updates are you downloading? As you can see in our test environment, we're only downloading critical updates, definition updates, that gives us updates for Windows Defender, security updates, and upgrades. Perhaps we'd want to add feature packs. If we're running SQL Server or other types of specialized software, Perhaps there's feature packs that we would want to make available as they become updated. Service packs, update roll-ups, and so on. The update files and languages. Where do we store those? Now, two different options here. You could tell it not to store the update files locally. And what would happen then is you would authorize an update, but then your computers have to all connect to Microsoft Update. So you're not saving any bandwidth. They would all go out to Microsoft Update. Almost always you're going to store your update files locally on the server. Now the two options that you can use are to download the update files to this server. And you only do that when those updates are improved. No point in downloading an update if you're not going to approve it. Once it's downloaded, then it can be installed on your client computers. Now you can also specify download express installation files. Now this can provide a faster download from Microsoft Update, but the updates are larger and they'll increase the download times on your server. So you may be able to distribute them quickly to your client computers, but you're going to greatly increase the download time on your servers. And you can also specify the language that you're going to make those updates available in. You can specify multiple languages. You can specify synchronization schedule, how many times a day, or are you only going to do it manually? Automatic approvals, very important. For example, definition updates. When an update is in definition updates, automatically approve the update for all computers. So as soon as a new definition update comes in, it's automatically approved to be installed. There's also advanced where you can determine can the WSUS server itself update itself automatically. How our computers connect to us. This we're going to talk about in a few moments. If you use the Update Services console, this is called server-side targeting. If we use group policies, this is called client-side targeting. A server cleanup wizard that we can run to be able to clean up unused files. A reporting roll-up. You can choose to have your downstream servers report. Email notifications, be able to get status reports as well as email notification when new updates are synchronized. Join the Microsoft Improvement Program, a personalization, and you can run all these things in the Windows Server Configuration Wizard. That's how that works. Now, the console, as you saw, it includes an update section, a computer section, downstream servers if you have one listed, synchronizations, reports, and options. Let's take a little bit closer look at that. If I select computers needing update and select updates needed, I can generate a report showing me what updates are required. Reporting. Now, our other reports are here. We can do update status summary, computer status summary. It generates, and it's as simple as selecting it and finding out what's been done. You can select each individual server, view status, and so on. Here would be your downstream servers if any are defined. Here we can view the synchronizations that have occurred. For example, if we look here for 5, there's 5 new updates that were synchronized here. We can double click, we can view a report, and we can see what those are. And of course, computers, all computers, using the client-side targeting, no computers will go into unassigned. They will automatically go into the group that's defined in their group policy. If you use server-side targeting, as new computers connect to your WSUS server, they will all go into unassigned, and you will have to manually move each one into the group that you want to be able to approve those updates for. Now, there's two different ways that we can define our downstream servers: in replica mode or autonomous mode. What is a replica? A replica is like a mirror. If we specify that a downstream WSUS server is a replica, it mirrors the exact same update approvals, settings, computers, groups, everything from that upstream server. It can't be used to approve any updates. You have to do all the approvals on the upstream computer. Now, if you specify to use that WSUS server in autonomous mode, you will see exactly what is available from that upstream server, but it's up to you to define what approvals are given to what updates. Configuring our clients to use WSUS. The most efficient way is to use group policy objects. We need to determine a way for our clients to be able to connect to that WSUS. Without us defining a way, they're simply going to connect to MicroStream Update. If we've got a domain, we've got Active Directory. This gives us the ability to create group policy objects and configure how our clients connect. So for example, we looked at those settings. You would create a new group policy object. Those settings are all found under Computer Configuration, Policies, Administrative Templates, Windows Components, Windows Update. And just so you know, this is where that's at. If we edit a policy, go into the policy editor, we'll expand Policies under Computer Configuration, Administrative Templates, Windows Components, and scroll down to Windows Update. And there are all those settings for you to define. Now, the first time that you've defined an update policy, until that computer understands that there's a new group policy for it, it's not going to know that it needs to connect using that. So what you may do is, on that computer, once you've defined a new policy and you want it to use that new policy, you're going to need to do a GP update /force. Otherwise, you're going to have to sit and wait until the next polling interval for group policies to get applied to systems. Remember that user policies get applied on logon, computer policies get applied on startup. WSUS, however, doesn't require a restart, so it should be able to get applied on the fly per se. Once you've applied that policy, and you can verify that by going to rsop.msc, if you're logged on as an administrator, you'll be able to see both computer and user policies. A standard user running rsop.msc will only be able to see those policies being defined against their user policy. They will not have access to the computer configuration. If we right-click on Computer Configuration and go to Properties, we can see right there the London server's group policy is being applied to them. We can close that. We know that the policy is being applied. We can then either go to Settings, Updates, Update and Security, and tell it to check for updates, or we can run the following command: Windows/system32 wuauclt.exe, and then with a /detect now. If you want to trigger a reporting to your WSUS server, you do the same thing, except you type in report now. and press enter. This triggers a reporting function for that client to connect and report its status. If we go ahead and we look here and let's see any status, and we're going to refresh. We're on our WSUS server. Here it is. Last status report at 10:08, so it did not update yet. It should update. Let's see here. Let's see. Last contact. It has not updated yet. Let's take a look here. Let's see what we can do to try to trigger that. And yes, I have a loud dog. Okay, so it last checked at 11:37. Let's see if that gets reflected. Yes, it did. Let's in turn tell it to report. Sometimes it updates immediately, sometimes it takes a while for it to trigger. That did it. So without it, there's no point, it understands that there's no point for it to report if it had not previously contacted the update server since its previous update or previous contact. If it hadn't contacted and made any changes, the reporting would be the same. Now if we look under our computers, we can see now we have 3 that show updated and installed. So remember that GP update space/force and the WUAU CLT detect now and /report now. How did I configure those groups on my WSUS server? I simply selected all computers, right-clicked and said add computer group. And now I could define a new group just like London computers or servers to appear here. It's just that easy. That's how we organize our computers in our console. This gives us a way to target those specific systems. We could have it done by location, perhaps Orlando computers, or we could do it by operating system, Windows 10 computers. Depends on how you want to do your planning. If that computer doesn't get assigned to a specific group, it's going to go into the unassigned computers. Remember, if it's using the server side targeting, it's going to go to unassigned. A computer can be a member of more than one group, and groups can be built in a hierarchical structure. If I come down to one of my groups that I've defined, such as London Computers, I could define another group underneath it, hierarchical view. When an update is rolled out to a parent group, that's what we call it when you use that hierarchy, that hierarchical structure, and you apply an update to that parent group, it will also be distributed to the child groups. So if you have multiple systems that you all want to have those updates applied to, you could use that hierarchical structure. Desktop computers is a group, and then underneath that you put all your other various perhaps locations for those Windows 10 computers. You approve that update one place and it filters down into all the rest. We've talked about server-side targeting. When we use server-side targeting, those systems are all going to go into the unassigned group, and then you're going to have to manually move them. It's a lot of work. Using the client-side targeting, our group policies will define exactly which group they're supposed to be assigned to. If we look down here, right here, enable client-side targeting, target name, servers. That exactly correlates with the name servers here. You have to make sure that your naming is correct. They have to be specific. Can't be close. Patch management in mixed environments. You're going to have Windows 7 computers. Well, hopefully those Windows 7 computers have all gone away. but you're going to have Windows 8, Windows 8.1, Windows 10, and you're probably going to have multiple versions of your Windows servers. I mean, companies just don't replace everything when something new comes out. Even though it's getting ready to go out of support, there may still be some Windows 2008 R2 servers in your organization. When you determine which updates you need to deploy, you got to review updates for all of the Microsoft client, server, and application versions that you have. When we go to approve those updates, you're going to select an update, you're going to select what group needs it, and then you're going to approve for install. Let's take a look at that. If we come over here and we say updates, and we pick security updates. So for example, if we had this update for Adobe Flash Player, and hopefully we're not running Flash Player anymore, but we wanted to approve that, we could right click on it and select approve, or if we're selecting multiple updates, we can come over here to the right hand column and select approve, and then define those groups that it's going to be applicable for. If you're going to approve it for installation on all systems, you could select all computers and approve for install. Once a update is approved, you could select that update, for example, and we're going to go to the approval. Now, it's already approved for install, correct? We can click on that again and we can specify a deadline. We can specify a custom time. For example, the current time on my computer is 11:45. Well, if I click OK, that means it has passed its deadline now. A second later, it has to be installed immediately. If you've got updates that for some reason are not getting installed, if you're giving your users flexibility in how they install updates and they don't do it, you can define a deadline here and that will force its installation. That covers our WSUS section. Let's talk about Windows Defender. It's a security software suite. It's designed to protect our computers against viruses, spyware, as well as other types of malware. It does that by providing what we call real-time protection, and it will notify you if malware attempts to install itself on your computer. Windows Defender and all other security software like it is what we call an intrusion prevention system. It will detect and also take actions to protect your computer, and it will report to you. It uses definition files. That's why it's so critical that we download and automatically approve those definition files. We can view the Windows Defender screen and get an instant overview of the state of the system. We have real-time protection, our virus and spyware definitions. We have multiple scan options and details as far as the previous scan. We can view any quarantine items that have been detected and quarantined, what has been allowed, and detected items. Here are the steps to remove a quarantined item. In our Windows Defender Update and Security Windows Defender section, you can determine how your real-time protection works, if you're utilizing cloud-based protection, to automatically submit samples of threats to Microsoft, as well as providing some exclusions if you have certain directories. Depending on your server and the application installed in your server that you're providing on your network, you may wish to define some exclusions to those folders or files for that application. Not uncommon. Here are the steps for configuring a scan and running it. Now, we can integrate Windows Defender with WSUS and Windows Update. We're doing that. When updates are installed using Windows Updates, that Windows Update program also updates Windows Defender. So make sure that you do select Windows Defender so that it will update the program and definitions. The Windows Defender section has been a very small section in this lecture. However, it's very important. Make sure you understand what they're talking about here. At this point, we're going to end our first part of our lecture on Lesson 18. We'll pick it up in our second half where we discuss backup and restore operations using Windows Server Backup. I will speak with you shortly. Thank you.